We are going to work on learning how to make this poncho that is reversible and has armhole openings in it. So we will get started right away. Our first step is going to be to prepare the hood. You have two rectangles that should be the same size as each other. The direction cut size for those are listed in step 1 in case you missed it. They're going to be assembled the same way. I'm just going to show you on one of them here. What you're going to do is you're going to fold it in half so that it looks more like a square than it does a rectangle. So you're going to match together the short edges here along the side, the folded edges on this side here, and then you're going to pin together one of the short sides. I'm just going to pin together the top part here. That's going to become the back of the hood. And then the folded part is going to become the part that goes on the top of the head. So it kind of frames the face on this edge here. So go ahead now and sew together just this one edge that you have pinned using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I have done this to both pieces of my hood, the exterior print and the lining print, just sewed together that one short edge. And now you get to decide if you want your hood to be pointed or if you want it to have more of a rounded edge. If you want a pointed hood, this is what it's going to kind of look like. Or if you want it to be more of a rounded edge, I'll show you how to do that here now. What you're going to do is you're going to have your fold of the fabric to the side, the seam up to the top. Your template here for the gusset is located on the very last page of your packet, and it tells you which way to lay this so that it cuts out the right way. So I have the folded edge, this arrow pointed here, which is on this side, and then the raw edge with the seam sewn on it is going to be on this edge here. What you'll do is you just line it up next to that corner so that the edges of the template are in alignment with the edges of the fabric. You can trace along that. Use the fabric marking pen. I'm using a Sharpie so that you can see it a little bit better. And you're just going to trace it, and then you're going to cut along your trace line through both of the layers here of the fabric. Okay. So then once you have that cut out, you can open up your fabric so that it kind of looks more like a triangle and that the raw edges here line up naturally. Depending on what size of poncho you're making, your amount showing here may differ slightly depending on the size. So don't worry if yours looks a little bit different than mine. But go ahead and pin together the top edge of where you cut off that corner for the gusset. And then now take it to your sewing machine and sew together that top edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now that I have that sewn, I'll show you kind of the difference of how the hood really looks once you have it together. If you have the gusset in there, it looks a little bit more not as Santa Clausy, if you want to put it that way, versus the pointed hood. And you remember, when it's on the person, it's going to be kind of off to the side. You'll see it. Let me see if I can get that angle right for you. You can see it more this way, or if it's being worn this way, it's more of a point. This would look super cute if you had like a pom-pom you wanted to add to that. So depending on what style you're looking for will depend if you want to use this template or not. Since I am doing this one here, I'm going to repeat that step here with my lining so that they match up nicely. Then we'll move forward and work on the main body using the template provided. So I have my template assembled. I did that off camera. The diagram for how to assemble it is listed in the written instructions here. But I'm currently going to be making the baby size, so I'm going to cut along the baby size markings, and I'll be throwing away the rest. Looks like I didn't tape that well enough here. I'm going to add that and get that taped in here now. One moment. So now that I have my template cut out, we are ready to cut our rectangles that we have prepared from the first step or two in the pattern. I just want to do a quick mention here. If you have a directional print fabric, this one kind of sort of is, not really. You can see my flowers are growing up like this, just for a different example for you, just so you can kind of see that orientation. These dinosaurs here would be more of a, okay, this definitely has to face up and this definitely has to face down. And so your rectangle should be cut in that manner. The long is the width, and then the up and down is the vertical length direction there. So take your rectangle. We're going to kind of follow suit what we did in terms of folding with our hood. We're going to fold it in half so that it makes more of a square shape than a rectangle shape. And keep in mind, if you do have a directional print, which one is up and which one is down, because that'll make a difference here for this next step. I'm gonna have this edge be my down, and so I wanna make sure when I'm cutting this, this is gonna be the front section of the poncho. I wanna make sure I'm cutting this section off here. So now you can take your template and you're going to place that arrow towards the fold of the fabric. Doesn't matter which one unless you have a directional print. If you have a directional print, you're going to want to have it on the top edge near where the neck is going to be. And so I'm going to put it right here so that I'm cutting away this way here, and it will be right side up and down. So now you can take your fabric marking pen and trace along the curved edge, just making sure that your edge of the template is in alignment with this folded edge and then this raw edge up here. And you can trace along there. Now, if you are wanting to, you can stack your layers of fabric and just do this once and cut through both of them, one for the lining and one for the exterior. I wouldn't suggest doing all 4 of those layers together because they shift. It's going to be really hard to assemble a little bit later on. But I'm going to be showing you 2 different ways to do this, so I'm just doing one at a time here right now. And so I'm going to cut along this line. And then when I open this up, it'll be my front section of my poncho. Okay, now, if you don't want to mess with the templates, you can do this a different way. Let me show you how. You'll take your rectangle, just like we talked before, and we're going to fold it in half. Decide if you want to up or down style. I'm going to have mine be like this. I think this one isn't as obvious, but I'm going to have it be this side up, this side down. You're going to fold it in half just like before. And if I want this to be my top, I'm going to come around this way here. I don't have my measuring tape with me, but I did measure. I'm doing the baby size, so it's 16 inches. What you're going to do is you're going to take your corner of your measuring tape and then the other edge over here, and you're going to take your pencil and you're going to just kind of trace along that marking all the way through so that it's 16 inches all the way like this. And that'll give you a nice curved shape. Again, if you have a measuring tape, it's going to be a lot better than what I'm showing you here. But that'll give you your nice curve like that. And then you would cut along that line. So then we have both our front and our back of our poncho. They should be identical sizes. And if you did the side up, the side down print, it should be opposite of each other as they meet here in the center, because when the kiddo is wearing this, it's going to be like this. So that way it'll be directional print on either side of the kiddo. So now we will get ready to move on to the next part. So next we're going to make a marking in terms of where our armholes are going to be. When I'm making this video, I haven't yet quite decided how I want the template to look, so it may not be exactly what I'm showing you now in terms of what your piece is going to look like, but it's going to be something very similar, and I'll make sure I'm very clear on the written instructions in terms of what to do with it. But I believe it's going to be something along the following. Whatever size poncho you're going to make, you're going to have a different size line to follow. And I believe I'm going to have all of them be the same start-stop point on the edge of the poncho, but again, refer to those written instructions. What you're going to do is you're going to take one piece of the lining and one piece of the exterior print. You're going to do the same steps for both of them, and you're going to take your template. You're going to measure 2 inches. Again, refer to those written instructions from the edge of this corner with the long straight edge and where it starts to taper. And you're going to put a pin at that 2-inch mark. And then you're going to measure the length of the line that I tell you, and you're going to put another pin right at that mark. And you're going to repeat here for this side over here. Again, we're going to measure 2 inches. We're going to put a pin right there, and then the length of the line, and put a pin at that mark there. Now, what I want you to do is to take your other piece of fabric, lining versus you know, match it up. If you're working on the exterior, use the other exterior print. I'm doing the interior lining, so I'm going to match these half circles together so that the right sides of the fabric are facing one another. and I'm going to pin them in place so that, let's make sure they're the same size they are. Okay, so pin them together. And when you get to the pin that you have marked here for where not to sew, I'm actually going to leave that pin there. I'm just going to move it between both layers. I'm going to add another pin. I'm going to make them kind of be like a shape of an X. That's my note to myself, like, don't sew past this point. And then the same on this edge here. I'm going to just scooch that through both layers, make an X print out of those pins, and then same on this edge over here. Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're going to take this to the sewing machine. You're going to start here. You're going to start and then stop when you get to this first X. Make a good forward, backward to make that secure. You're going to skip this section. You're going to start here, go back and forth a few times to make sure it's a secure start seam. You're going to sew all the way across. You're going to stop at this X. Back and forth, stop, cut your thread, skip this section. Do the same for this last little bit here, using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So now that you have that sewn together, you can see your arm openings are starting to take form. What I want you to do now is to flip it over, and I want you to, these raw edges here that we have left unsewn, just go ahead and fold it over to match that seam allowance that you have here, maybe even a little bit more, because it can have a little bit more of an opening than that. And pin it, kind of pin it in place so that it keeps that fold all throughout. And you're going to pin both sides of each of the armholes. So I'm going to be using, looks like 4 pins on each side here. If you have a cotton print, which you might for the baby size if you're using cotton, or if you have something that is able to be ironed, go ahead and press your seam open at that point, just so that it lays nice and flat and has a little bit more of a crease. You aren't able to iron minky. It'll lose your little bubble dots and it can scorch, so do not iron minky, or some fleeces aren't able to be ironed either. So just be aware of the type of material that you have and if you're able to iron it or not. So pin those edges. I'll finish that here now. Okay, now I want you to find the exact center of the poncho. To do that, fold it in half, match the seams up and on the edge here, and then right where that seam is and where the fold is where that corner section is going to be. I want you to do the same with your exterior and your interior prints. Okay, now I have my centers marked. I'm going to lay my lining fabric right side facing up over my workspace. I'm just going to make sure that it's laid out flat and it's not bunching or puckering at that center seam. And then I'm going to take my exterior print and I'm going to match that. I'm going to switch this pin here to the other side here just so that I can see it better. All right, I'm going to match my seams up with the 2 pieces of fabric and then extend my circle. Okay, so hopefully this is the moment of truth that your circles are the same size as one another. Sometimes if you have one side cotton and one side minky, they can be a little bit different. Hopefully they're close enough where it won't cause much of an issue. If not, you'll have to trim one down. But here you see I have my center marked. Next, you're going to take your circular template, which I haven't cut mine out yet. One moment. All right, take your circular template, and I folded mine in 4 so that I know exactly where the center is. And I'm going to match that X marks the spot with my pin right here. And then you can trace around there for your circle. And you're going to then cut along your traced line. You'll be cutting through both layers of the fabric, both the exterior and the interior print. Circles can be kind of tricky, If you accidentally cut yours too small or too big, it's going to make a really big difference when you come to attach your hood. You're going to end up with too big of a gap between where the hood starts and stops, or maybe not much of a gap at all. So try to be very precise with your cutting of your circle and your tracing of the circle so you don't end up with a gaping neck. Okay, take my pins out because I don't need those in there anymore. Our next step is to attach our hood form onto our poncho. The exterior print is going to be sewn onto the exterior print of the poncho, same with the lining part of the hood to the lining part of the lining of the poncho. So the seam on the back here is going to be the back of the hood, okay? So if you have a preference on which side you want to be the front of your poncho versus the back, now's the time to decide that. I don't really care in mine. I'm just gonna have it be right here. I wanna find that back corner. So I'm just going to fold it in half to find that section here. And I'll put a little pin on there to know that that is indeed the exact back, because we do have those side seams. I wanna make sure that they're pretty equal with one another. So what you're going to do is, this one can get a little tricky, so just listen to me carefully. So you're going to have the right side of your fabric facing up, and then you're going to take your hood, the side with the seam on it, and you're going to match that with your pin and pin it in place. Okay, then you're going to work your way around to pin the rest of this all the way around, okay? You have to do it in little sections because you're working with a circular form here. And so just take your time and do that now. I have one side done. Now I'll flip it and do the other side. All right, so now you can see we have the hood pinned onto the opening right there. We'll get ready to sew next. When we sew this, we're going to actually start our seam a 1/2 inch from the front edge of this hood part here. So you can see I have my corner of my hood. This is the back that follows around the neck, and then this part here is going to go wrap around the face. We're going to start our seam a 1/2 inch from this corner right here, and we're going to sew around the neck area, and then when we get to the other side, we're going to then stop our seam a 1/2 inch from this edge here, okay? I would use a 1/4 inch seam allowance from the edge here, but then stop at that 1/2 inch mark from the corner. So once you've completed sewing that, you can lift it up and you can see that hood has taken form and it is connected. Now I want you to repeat that same process on the lining of your poncho. Right, so now I have both my exterior and my lining. The hoods are attached, and we will work on doing that center slit here in just a little bit, not quite yet. So what I want you to do is lay one of the pieces, it doesn't matter which one, lay it out so that the circle is open and the hood is kind of up like this, and then take your other piece and have it so that the right sides of the fabric are facing the other right sides of the fabric, and match that up this way. Match up your seams so you have right sides facing one another. And what you're going to do now is you're going to pin around the perimeter of this entire circle. I am going to speed up this camera. I might just skip it entirely because I think it's going to take me a little bit. But just match up your side seams first and then pin around, making sure that everything lays flat and neat against one another. All right, so I have that pinned all the way around. What you're going to do now is you're going to sew around this entire perimeter of the circle. You don't have to leave an opening because we'll be turning the project right side out through the neck opening here. You can see on some of the back of mine, like my minky extended past my other circle. So I might, before I sew it, I might just trim that back or just use this as my guiding allowance. I would do 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch from the edge. You have a little bit of wiggle room there, and just make sure that it looks nice and circular. So go ahead and sew that now. All right, so I went ahead, I didn't trim anything. I just used my slightly smaller circle as my guide, and I did a about just over a 1/4 inch seam allowance from that edge. So you can see I had a little bit of overlap from the slinky. If you want to trim that off now, if you have the same type of thing, you can. I'm just going to leave mine. I'm not too worried about it. Now turn your project right side out through the neck area. I still have my pins in from the arm openings. Leave those be for now. So turn this right side out, and you see it kind of looks, if you go this way, you have a hood here, a hood over here. Go ahead and find your edges and make that look more like a circle so that the seam that we just sewn is now on the edge of the fabric. All right, so now what you want to do is we're going to top stitch this edge so that it continues to always lay flat and even. And I forgot to remove that pin. So go ahead and kind of manipulate the fabric so that the seam is on the edge and pin it in place, and do that all the way around. Once you have it pinned all the way around, I'm going to not record anymore, but now you're going to take it back to the sewing machine, and I want you to do, I would do about an inch seam allowance. So top stitch it an inch from the edge all the way around that circle, just to give it more of a finished look. I guess this part would be optional. You wouldn't necessarily have to do it, but man, it sure gives it that nice finished professional look to it. So go ahead and do that now. So as you can see, I top stitched the edge an inch or so from the edge, and now it'll always lay that way. Now the real fun begins. Now we're gonna work on the finishing touches. First, we're going to complete these arm openings. As you remember, we have our fabric kind of folded and pinned in place from where that opening is. They should line up, and so go ahead now. What you're going to do is you're going to match the fold of your exterior print to the fold of your lining print, and you're going to pin them together so that the folded edges are in alignment along that whole opening there. And then you're going to wrap it around and do the same for this other side. Okay, so now I have, you can see I have them pinned together, and what you're going to do then is you're going to top stitch those secure to one another so that all the raw edges are tucked inwards, and you have your then opening for the hand. So go ahead and top stitch that. Now I do a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I would start here, I'd go down, and then I would kind of turn a little bit and come back up and just do it all in one go around. All right, so I have that top stitched, and so all the raw edges are tucked in, and on the bottom there I kind of did back and forth sideways here just to give it a little bit more extra securement. And so do that on for both of the arm openings. So now I have both of those arm openings top stitch, and you can see it truly is reversible because no matter what way I have it, inside out or the other way, it looks great. So next step then is to be making, if you're wanting a slit in front of the here for like a little button attachment, I would recommend it. It gives it a little bit more ease of donning this on and off for the child. And so lay your piece out flat. So if you're wanting that slit, go ahead and measure, depending on what size you're making. I'm doing 3 inches from the top of the neck opening to down. Larger sizes, I think I have 4 inches written. Just make sure you're centered. And I'm just going to draw a line straight down for those 3 inches. And then I'm going to cut here with my rotary cutter, like that. All right, the last step for sewing is the most tedious, unfortunately. We're going to tuck inwards these raw edges of the brim of the hood here by about 1/2 inch. Just like we did for these arm openings, we're going to tuck it inwards, and we're going to match that folded edge to the folded edge of the lining. Now, I've had a lot of customers complain about this step, and they're like, well, why can't we do this beforehand? But with a circular shape, you wouldn't be able to turn it right side out with it just coming and twisting and not actually ever coming right side out. So you have an option, and I have found that this is probably the easiest option, is to hand stitch this rather than doing this first, and then you'd end up having to tuck inwards the entire circle and sew that all around. It's a lot longer of an area, and it's harder to get it to make it look like a nice crisp corner, or nice clean curved edge. So this truly is the best way that I have found to do these ponchos. If you have a better right way, please let me know, because this is so tedious here, but it works. So tuck inwards by 1/2 inch all the way around the brim of the hood. I'll speed up the camera here and we'll touch base for what to do with that slit. Okay, so now that we have the brim of the hood pinned and ready to be top stitched, we do have this neck opening section here to work on as well. Now, the hardest part of it is going to be doing this bottom part of the V right here. And truly what happens is I end up folding, lay it out so you can see it better. I end up taking this top section here, right here, and I kind of fold it over so it makes like a super long skinny triangle. I'm folded up here probably by just under 1/2 inch, and it just comes to a point over here. So it doesn't truly fold over right there because we have to switch directions and go the other way. So I'm going to repeat that same shape with my lining, and then I'm going to match up my folded edges and pin them together. And again, as you get towards this V here, just tuck inwards those raw edges as best as you can, but at the bottom point of it, it is going to be a raw edge showing, and we're just going to stitch over that to cover that up so it doesn't fray. And then when you get to this top part here, you're going to, I'm already folded over this way, I'm going to now fold it again downwards by about 1/4 inch. You might have to take that pin out just for a moment so that you can do the same for the lining to make that nice corner shape there. And then your neck section is also going to be turned inwards by about 1/4 inch so that it now looks like this. Let me lift it up so you can see it. Do you see how I did that? And you can see my lining matches up on the back side as well. So it's a nice clean folded pinned edge. We're going to repeat on this side. I'll speed up the camera so you don't have to watch it as long. All right, so I have that opening here pinned all the way around. Now we're ready to take it to the sewing machine and top stitch that around. Now, around the hood area, I would use about 1/4 inch seam allowance, same for these top sections here. And then when you get to the slit part, I would try to keep it as close to the edge as possible. And then when you get to the bottom of this V, I would just kind of go almost more of like a satin stitch side to side to side, or a zigzag stitch numerous times back and forth right here, just to give that bottom of that extra securement so it doesn't want to then split open even more. Hold on, before we top stitch, I almost forgot to mention, if you're choosing to do a little elastic button rather than doing an actual buttonhole, you're going to want to insert your elastic at this point. So I have my 4 inches of elastic, I'm folding it in half, and then I'm going to just tuck it in here. I'm going to go about a little over a half, or a little over an inch down from the top here. Take my pin out, and I'm going to insert my raw edges in there, and I'm going to pin it in place. So that way it is truly reversible and you don't see a backside on there. So then when I attach my button here, it'll connect right where I want it to. So there we have it. Now we can top stitch around the whole perimeter here, 1/4 inch, and then 1/4 inch, maybe a 1/2 inch allowance, 1/4 inch on these top edges, and then very, very scant near the edge for the V part with a zigzag stitch on the bottom. All right, so I have that top stitched. You can see how I did my corners coming down here, quick switch, do a 90-degree turn there, and then kind of angle it to follow that shape of the neckline. And then on the bottom, you can see I just kind of went back and forth to make that extra secure so it won't rip down anymore. The last step then is to attach your button. If you chose to make this reversible, which it really is, there's nothing, you know, it's no raw edges showing anywhere, you would then attach a button on both sides as needed to truly make that reversible. Or if you only wanted, you know, just one side to be the side out, then you would just do one button. You could attach it with either by hand or with your machine, whatever your preference is. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my station. Thank you so much.